It started with an innocent favor. A quiet evening. A knock at the door. I never thought opening it would change everything. But then I saw him, tall, strong, and too familiar. My nephew. He wasn't supposed to look at me that way. And I wasn't supposed to feel it, that spark. That heat. But once it started, there was no stopping it. One touch. One moment. And suddenly the line between right and wrong didn't exist. What happened next? It's the kind of secret I'll carry forever. Stay with me, because this story only gets darker. It was supposed to be quick. A book. A favor. Nothing more. But when I opened the door and saw him standing there, everything shifted. Lucas. His eyes locked on mine, warm and steady. Too steady. I stepped aside, letting him in, but my pulse quickened. His voice, ***, deep, smooth and calm, ***, filled the room. Thanks for this, Amanda. I smiled, pretending to be unaffected. But the way he moved, the way his muscles flexed under his shirt, it wasn't fair. He sat down, stretching out on my couch like he belonged there. And maybe that's what scared me most, how much it felt like he did. I went to get the book, needing a moment to breathe. But when I caught my reflection in the mirror, reality hit. The tank top and shorts I'd thrown on earlier suddenly felt too casual. Too revealing. I thought about changing but didn't. Instead, I tied my hair back, smoothed the wrinkles in my clothes, and told myself it was fine. But when I stepped back into the living room, his eyes flickered over me. Quick. Sharp. Dangerous. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't going to be as innocent as I'd thought. I tried to act normal. Sat at the other end of the couch. But the space between us felt too small, too charged. He leaned back, his arm resting along the back of the couch, his eyes lingering just long enough to make my skin warm. You don't have to rush me out, he said, flashing that easy smile. I forced a laugh. You're fine. Stay as long as you want. His eyes didn't leave mine. You sure about that? My breath hitched. I crossed my legs, suddenly too aware of how exposed my bare skin was. Was I imagining this? Or did he feel it too? The tension hanging thick between us? I shifted, brushing my foot against his leg by accident. Sorry. Don't be. His voice was lower this time, warmer. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. You look tense, he said, leaning closer. Rough day. Always. The words slipped out before I could stop them. You should let me help with that. I froze. Help how? Turn around. I should have said no. But when he shifted behind me, his hands settling on my shoulders, my body betrayed me. Warm. Firm. Dangerous. His thumbs pressed into my muscles, and I exhaled, my eyes fluttering shut. I shouldn't have let it happen. But as his fingers moved lower, slower, I didn't stop him. And in that moment I knew I didn't want to. His hands didn't stop. Firm, slow strokes that sent heat rippling through me. I told myself it was just a massage, just a favor. But the way his thumbs lingered, pressing deeper, made it clear, this wasn't innocent. Is this okay? He murmured, his breath warm against my ear. Too close. Too intimate. I should have pulled away. But instead I leaned into his touch. It's perfect. I felt his hands slide lower, brushing the edge of my tank top. My breath hitched. His fingers hesitated, but only for a second, before continuing, slower this time. You're so tense, Amanda. His voice was softer now. Deeper. I swallowed hard. It's been a long time since. I trailed off, the words sticking in my throat. He didn't ask me to finish. Instead, his hands slipped lower, grazing the tops of my arms. The heat of his touch sent a shiver through me. I shouldn't have let him. But the way his fingers traced my skin, the way his breath hovered near my neck, made me forget every reason why this was wrong. And when his lips brushed my shoulder, light, testing, I didn't move. I didn't stop him. I turned slightly, our eyes meeting, dark, searching, hungry. Tell me to stop, he whispered. But I couldn't. Instead, I let him lean in closer, his lips brushing mine. Soft at first. Then harder. Deeper. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the rules. Not the consequences. Just him. Just us. And as his hands gripped my waist, pulling me closer, I knew. This was only the beginning. I should have stopped him. But when his lips crashed into mine, rough and urgent, I melted. I wanted this. His hands slid up my sides, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. My breath hitched as his fingers trailed under my tank top, his touch burning against my skin. Lucas. I said his name, but it came out more like a plea than a warning. He paused, his eyes locking onto mine, searching, questioning. Do you want me to stop? I couldn't answer. Instead, I reached for him, my fingers tangling in his shirt as I pulled him closer. No. That one word shattered the last bit of restraint between us. His lips were on me again, hot, demanding. I felt his hands slide down, gripping my hips as he pulled me into his lap. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice raw. I shivered, every inch of me alive under his touch. "This is wrong," I breathed, but even as I said it, I arched into him, craving more. "Then stop me," he murmured against my neck, his lips trailing lower. But I didn't stop him. I didn't want to. His hand slid beneath my top, pulling it over my head, leaving me bare beneath his gaze. Hungry, possessive, dangerous. He leaned in, his lips tracing a path down my collarbone as his fingers explored every inch of me. I gasped, my body responding to him in ways I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't safe. But it was exactly what I needed. And as we fell back against the couch, tangled in each other, I knew. There was no turning back now. The room felt smaller. The weight of what we'd done hung heavy in the air. I sat there, breathless, wrapped in nothing but the heat of his body and the scent of his skin. Lucas leaned back, his eyes dark as they lingered on me. "I shouldn't have," he started, but I stopped him with a look. "Don't." Because the truth was, I didn't regret it. Not the way his hands explored me. Not the way his lips had made me feel alive again. And definitely not the way I still wanted him. But as the silence stretched between us, reality crept in. What had I done? I pulled the throw blanket over myself, trying to cover more than just my skin, trying to hide my guilt. "We can't do this again." He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned in closer, his voice low and steady. "Then tell me to leave." I opened my mouth, ready to say it, but the words wouldn't come. Because the truth was, I didn't want him to leave. I wanted him to stay. And he knew it. His fingers brushed my cheek, tilting my face toward his. "This doesn't feel wrong, Amanda." "Not to me." I closed my eyes, my heart racing. It should. But when he kissed me again, slower this time, deeper, I let myself forget. Forget the rules. Forget the guilt. Forget the line we'd already crossed. Because in that moment, there was only him. And I wasn't ready to let him go. I didn't stop him. His lips moved slowly, deliberately, as if daring me to pull away. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned into him, letting his hands slide under the blanket, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. "I can't stop thinking about you," he whispered, his breath hot against my neck. I shivered, my body reacting before my mind could catch up. "This is wrong," I said, but my voice was barely a whisper, weak and unconvincing. "Then why does it feel so right?" His words sent a shiver down my spine, and before I could answer, his lips were on mine again. Hungry, possessive, completely unstoppable. His hands explored every inch of me, tracing lines of heat down my body, making me forget everything outside this moment. "Lucas." His name slipped from my lips like a confession. I felt his breath hitch, his grip tightening as if he couldn't hold back any longer. And neither could I. I let him lay me back against the couch, his body pressing into mine, heavy and warm. "Tell me to stop," he murmured again, his lips trailing lower. I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I let him take me, right there in the dim glow of the living room. Rough. Desperate. Completely reckless. When it was over, we stayed tangled together, our breaths still uneven. I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts spinning. What had I done? But when he pulled me closer, his hand resting on my hip, all I could think was, I didn't want it to end. And deep down, I knew it wouldn't. The sun was already creeping through the blinds when I finally slipped out of his arms. I wrapped the blanket around me, my heart still racing as I stood there, staring at him. Lucas. My nephew. He looked peaceful, his bare chest rising and falling with every breath, like he hadn't just shattered every rule we were supposed to follow. I hated how much I wanted him again, how much I already missed his touch. But guilt hit me like a wave, crashing over the desire that still lingered. I grabbed my clothes, trying to steady my breath as I dressed quickly. I needed space. I needed to think. But before I could reach the door, his voice stopped me. Sneaking out. I froze, my hand on the knob. This was a mistake, Lucas. He sat up, the blanket falling away, revealing too much. You don't believe that. I turned to face him, but the look in his eyes, ***, calm, certain, ***, made my knees weak. We crossed a line. Yeah, he said, standing and stepping closer. And we both wanted it. It doesn't matter. We can't do this. He reached for me, his fingers brushing my wrist, sending shivers through me. You can't lie to me, Amanda. I know you feel this too. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, firm, but gentle. I won't let this be a mistake. His words made my heart skip, but I couldn't let him see it. It's already a mistake. I pulled free, stepping back. And it ends here. But as I turned and walked out the door, my body betrayed me. Because every step away from him felt wrong. And I already knew I wouldn't stay away for long. I spent the rest of the day pacing the house, replaying last night in my head. His hands. His lips. The way he made me feel. I told myself it was over, that I'd ended it. But deep down I knew it wasn't. Because every time I closed my eyes I saw him. Lucas. The way he looked at me, like I was the only thing he wanted. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was him. We need to talk. I hesitated. I should have ignored it. I should have let it go. But instead my fingers moved on their own. Come over. I hated how fast he showed up, how eager I was to see him again. I opened the door, and the moment our eyes met I felt it. The pull. The tension. The hunger. I told you it was over, I said, but my voice trembled. You didn't mean it. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and suddenly the room felt smaller. Lucas, we can't keep doing this. Why not? He moved closer, his eyes locked on mine. Because it's wrong. Then stop me. His hand brushed my cheek and I froze. I wanted to push him away, to end this once and for all. But when his lips crashed into mine again, asterisk asterisk hot, demanding, unstoppable. Asterisk asterisk I melted. I let him pull me in. Deeper. Harder. Needier. This time there was no hesitation. I didn't fight it. I didn't even try. And as we stumbled toward the bedroom, hands tangled and breaths heavy, I knew. I was too far gone to stop now. I lay tangled in the sheets, his body still pressed against mine, the heat between us refusing to fade. I knew this was wrong. But as his fingers traced lazy patterns along my skin, I didn't want it to end. Lucas propped himself up on one elbow, his eyes dark and unreadable. What now? He asked, his voice low. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the way my body still reacted to him. We forget this ever happened. He smirked, brushing a strand of hair from my face. You don't mean that. I pulled the sheet higher, suddenly aware of just how exposed I was. We have to stop, Lucas. This can't keep happening. And yet it did. His words hung heavy in the air. I tried to sit up, but he stopped me, his hand sliding down my arm, his touch igniting the fire I'd been trying to smother. You don't regret it, he said. And neither do I. I wanted to argue. But when his lips found my neck again, I gasped, and forgot everything I was about to say. Rough hands. Soft moans. Tangled sheets. It wasn't careful this time. It was desperate. Reckless. Addictive. When it was over, I stared at the ceiling, guilt creeping back in. We can't keep doing this, I whispered. But Lucas leaned over me, his lips brushing my ear. Then stop me. I couldn't. And as he kissed me again, pulling me under, I knew. I didn't want to. Not yet. Not ever. I woke up tangled in his arms, my heart pounding before I even opened my eyes. For a moment, it felt perfect, too perfect. But then reality hit. What had I done? I slipped out of bed carefully, grabbing my clothes and trying to steady my breath. I had to end this. For real this time. But before I could make it to the door, his voice stopped me. Running again, I turned to find him leaning against the headboard, shirtless, his eyes locked on me. This can't keep happening, Lucas. He smirked, leaning back like he owned the moment, like he already knew I wasn't going anywhere. You've said that before. I mean it this time. Do you? He stood, closing the distance between us. Because every time you say it, you end up right back here. His words hit me hard because they were true. I didn't trust myself around him. This has to stop, I whispered. He cupped my face, his touch making me tremble. Tell me you don't want this. I opened my mouth to lie, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I leaned into him one last time, letting his lips claim mine, hungry, possessive, and completely irresistible. But as he pulled me closer, I knew this wasn't just passion. It was obsession. And no matter how dangerous it was, I couldn't walk away. Not yet. Not ever.